What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Strength Coach Rants. I'm your host, Connor Lyons, and this week we're going to be talking about why running is mostly just a waste of your time. Today is November 30th. We are one day away from the least productive month of the year, and we are about 31 days away, or 32 days, I guess, away from everyone's New Year, New Me, New Year's resolution starting to take into effect. So everybody's probably pushing off getting into shape until January. December is notoriously, like I said before, bad from a productivity standpoint. Outside of like retail, businesses tend to not do very well. You've also got just productivity from your employees. If you've got kids, they're going to be out of school for 2 weeks at the end of the month. You're worried about shopping for Christmas and Hanukkah, and we're worried about getting the place clean because we've got, in-laws or family coming in that we may or may not want to actually see. So December tends to be like a month where a lot of people let themselves go, and a lot of people think, well, yeah, I'm going to get in shape during the new year because some arbitrary date on a calendar is a better start point than right this minute. So we're going to talk about why running is not necessarily the best modality to choose when you're going to implement your New Year, New Me, New Year's resolutions to lose weight or look a little bit better or get into a little bit better shape. However you want to frame it, it's all pretty much the same thing. But for some reason, running is always on the top of that list, or cardio in general. Today is really an indictment on running, but overall, I am not a very big fan of cardio for a lot of reasons, and we'll touch on some of them today. I might do a future podcast episode about all the reasons why cardio for the vast majority of people is an absolute and total waste of time. But running tends to be a big part of those New Year's resolutions, so we're going to talk about that today. So why is running often seen as a great way to lose weight? And to be honest, like the number one reason is because we've been told that it is. It's also like kind of hard, right? If you're out of shape and you go for a run, you're going to get tired. You get that instant gratification of I did something hard, right? So it must be good for me, and it's going to drive me towards my goal and move the needle where I want it to go in a positive direction. And it's just really not the case for the most part. So we're going to go over a couple things today. One being the diminishing returns of cardio. Two being just how bad running can truly be for you. And then the overall effect of running when it comes to caloric burn, body composition, and all of that. So we're going to go over all of that now. We're going to start today's episode off with a history lesson, much like last week where we talked about Unit 731 and how World War II Japan had an impact on people's perspectives when it comes to kids lifting weights. We're going to talk about how ancient Greece had an effect on our running today. So if you don't know the history of the marathon and how it happened, where it started, why it's 26.2 miles, we're going to go over that just very briefly right now. In 1490, the Athenians or the Greeks in general, were fighting against the Persians at Marathon. Now, Marathon was 26.2 miles away from Athens, and they were trying to hold back the Persians, and the second wave of fighters, or warriors rather, were waiting to find out if they needed to get ready to protect the city because the Greeks on the front lines hadn't been able to hold the Persians back. Well, it turns out that they did hold the Persians back. They won that battle, and they sent a Greek man by the, I'm going to butcher this name, Phidippides. It's a Greek name, so Phidippides sounds proper. They sent him to let everybody know, and he was really excited, running as hard as he could all the way from Marathon to Athens. He did so without stopping, right? So 26.2 miles from Marathon to Athens, gets to Athens and shouts Nike or Nikai, or I don't know how to pronounce it. Again, it's Greek. I'm not a Greek dude, but it's spelled Niki, which means victory. He was telling everybody, we won. It's all good. You can party. You don't have to worry about the Persians coming down here. And right after he did so, he keeled over and died. Right? He ran 26.2 miles as hard as he could, let everybody know that they won, and then he died. And just so we know, we're all on the same page. The very first person to ever run a marathon died. Now, while he was like a warrior, he was probably not in great cardiovascular shape from a distance standpoint. Try to think of maybe like a wide receiver or a running back, maybe like a DB of some kind, running as far as they could to let somebody know something. That would be kind of the equivalent of what that was, right? So think football, like a medium skill to not quite big skill, but like a medium skill sized guy running a marathon. That's what the Spartan, or not the Spartans, that's what the soldiers probably would have looked like. They are much more conditioned for hand-to-hand combat, which is a lot more like football, maybe being on the offensive line or something like that. They are not built to run marathons. And that's your average person, right? Most people are not built to run 26.2 miles. It is very far. And while humans are geared towards endurance in some respects, as a species when compared to like the rest of the animal kingdom, I don't know that we're built for that kind of endurance. I have a ton of respect for those who run marathons, but at the same time, it is probably the second most unnatural thing that we do as humans. The first would be sprinting. Sprinting is incredibly unnatural. And running a marathon or running very long distances would probably come in a very close second to that. So got there, let everybody know, keeled over and died. So the first guy to ever run a marathon died on the spot. And that's going to be our starting position today. So if we look at that and we use our rational brain, we think, all right, well, this guy, granted, he wasn't completely conditioned for distances, but if it killed the first guy to ever do it, I don't understand why it became something as humans that we wanted to accomplish. And so the modern day marathon, I'm actually gonna pull up. I wrote an article about this quite a few years ago. And it essentially back the founder of the modern Olympics, it was back in 1896, in order to pay tribute to this run from Marathon to Athens, wanted to add or include, I guess, the marathon into the Olympics, and thus it was born. The very first marathon, it was approximately 40,000 meters or 24.85 miles, right? So that's not quite 26.2, but they kind of used what they had. They had 25 entries and only 9 finished. I believe the guy who won was a postman, like a post officer, and winning time was 2 hours, 58 minutes, and 50 seconds, so almost 3 hours, right? Kind of compare that to today, and the fastest currently at the time that I wrote this, so granted, could be a little bit different today, was 2 hours, 1 minute, and 39 seconds, which is borderline 4.5 minute pace. That is flying. That is almost a full hour faster than the first guy to ever do it, proving that humans are pretty adaptable, and it's pretty wild that we're able to do, some of the things that we do. But again, we're really not designed to do it. You got to put yourself in some pretty interesting training in order to get to the position where that's something that's doable. So again, history lesson, Marley was dead to begin with, right? First ever person to run a marathon died. All right, now we're going to move on to some of the downsides of running, not just when it comes to aesthetics, but when it comes to overall like body health, size, all that fun stuff. All right, so if that history lesson wasn't quite enough to deter you from wanting to run long distances to try to gain better body composition or aesthetics, the next thing that we're going to talk about may. So there is a diminishing return when it comes to any kind of cardio, running being one of those forms of cardio. So imagine yourself, you are, let's say you really kind of let yourself go. You've ballooned up to 200 pounds, right? And you're like, I'm gonna start running because I want to lose this weight. I'm gonna change my diet. I'm gonna run. I'm gonna do all the right things. First week, January 2nd, right? Because you're not gonna do it on the 1st. You're either gonna be hungover, watching football, or doing something that's gonna involve you not running. So let's say the 2nd, which is a Tuesday. Although most people probably will not start something on a Tuesday, right? Because we can't start it in the middle of the week. So it may be the following Monday. Whenever it is you decide to start, you're going to go for that run. Now you've said, I'm going to run a mile, right? Mile for somebody who's like untrained is quite a distance. It's not something we're used to doing. Most people today don't even walk a mile or stand as long as it would take most people to run a mile. So going to run a mile is quite a feat. And you put your shoes on, you go outside, you go run, and you're dying, right? Heart rate, you got a Apple Watch or a Whoop band or a Fitbit, and it's telling you that your heart rate's like 180, which is wild because you're 45 years old and your max heart rate should only be like 175 or so. But right, you're all the way up to 180, and it stays there pretty much the whole time. You run that mile over the course of 14 minutes, which is not very fast, but you're not going to run it fast because you're not in very good shape, right? But you battle through it, and you get done, and you get home, you sit down, and you keep an eye on your heart rate for the next maybe 30 minutes, right? Maybe 10 minutes in, you're down from 180, you're down to like 150. Then maybe 10 minutes later, you're down to 130. And then maybe finally 10 minutes later, you're down back into the 90s, right? Maybe 20, 30 minutes, you've finally recovered from that run. And although you're tired, you're feeling pretty good about yourself. You look and it says you burned, let's say 450 calories, which is on the high end of things. As far as running goes, the American Council on Exercise says somewhere between 280 to 520 calories per half hour, right? So let's say 300 because you ran that mile and you did it in half that time. So let's say about 300 calories because you're super out of shape, so it took a lot of energy. Another good rule of thumb is about 100 calories per mile. But again, you're really out of shape, so it took a lot more energy to get this done. So let's say 300, all right? Again, on the high end of things. You go about your day, you eat right, you're a little sore, but you're feeling good about yourself. You ran that mile. Now, the next day, you say, I'm going to go run a mile again, right? Go outside, you run that mile. Today, you're a little tired and you're a little sore. You're a little beat up because you hadn't run in a long time. Maybe your knees are hurting a little bit, but you battle through it, and you're on that 14-minute mile again. You look back, your heart rate was up to 180 again, right? It's coming down a little bit faster. Maybe the second day, it only takes about 15 minutes, 20 minutes tops to get back to that your resting heart rate, which might be in like the 90s, because again, you're pretty out of shape because you've gone up to 200 pounds and your normal weight's like 150. And you look at the Fitbit or the whatever wearable tech you use, and it's like, you burn 295 calories, and you're like, awesome, like it's another 295 calories, boom, I'm getting it. You do that same thing over the course of a week, right? You battle through some soreness. That a week later on that next Tuesday, you go to run that mile, right? And you do it in like 11 minutes because you've had some cardiovascular adaptations. You've been able to lower that time. You're feeling a little bit better. You're able to push yourself, and you finish in 11 minutes. Your heart rate gets up to about 170, and it kind of plateaus there. You get home, you finish, took you less time. You look at your Fitbit or your wearable tech, and you're like, man, I only burned 220 calories today. What's wrong? Well, there's a couple things. For one, you might weigh less. If you like legitimately were on top of your diet, you're running like religiously, you're staying on top of things. Maybe you're lifting weights, so you're like burning some extra calories. You might have lost like 2 or 3 pounds, which is typical. Early on, it could even be more. It could be 5 or 6 pounds if you really got into it and stuck to it. So now you weigh less, which means it takes less energy to move you. You become a lot more efficient in this, so your heart's like better, your muscles are working better, so you're going to burn even fewer calories, right? So your heart rate didn't get as high, it's recovering faster, which is great, right? That's the whole intended consequence of running. But now you're not burning as many calories. So what do? You're like, I got 2 options here. Well, really 3. I can run further, right? I can try to run faster, or I can do a little bit of both. Right? This is where the diminishing returns comes into play because you've done exactly what you're meant to do. You've adapted to the load that you put your body under, or the stress rather that you put your body under, and now it doesn't take nearly as much effort to do what you did before. It's easier by design, right? So as you lose weight, as you become more efficient at running, you're going to have to run more and more and more and more to get the same benefits of the running that you did before, right? So that's the trap that is running when we're talking about doing it for, body comp and all that kind of stuff. You really don't burn that many calories when doing it once you become efficient at it. So you either have to spend more and more time doing it, expel a lot more effort doing it, or a little bit of both. So when it comes to using cardio as a method for weight loss, again, just be aware of the diminishing returns. It will not always get you what got you that 5-pound loss, won't get you that 10-pound loss. What gets you to 10 pounds damn sure won't get you to 20 pounds. So you're going to have to continuously do more and more and more and more. And, you know, if you are overweight, if you are somebody who's not athletic, if you're not an overly strong individual, that's going to take a toll on your joints over time. And which is going to kind of lead us to the next part of this, which is overweight people who are really, really overweight should not be running. And we're going to talk about what you should do instead. All right, so before we get into more of the detrimental parts of running, we're actually going to talk about something that's called excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. Now, this is kind of like one of the hidden benefits of lifting weights. Laymen call it the afterburn, or the period of time that you're going to burn more calories while you're not actually doing anything, so your body can recover from what you've done, whatever physical exercise you've done. Now, when we run or we do any form of cardio, that time period could be 30 to 60 minutes, somewhere less than an hour, right? Your body's going to take some time. In the last segment, I talked about like your heart rate coming back down, right? You're still burning more calories while your heart rate's trying to catch up and your body's trying to bring itself back to normal, to a homeostasis, if you will. So that's called excess post-exercise oxygen consumption, or EPOC. And again, that's just the afterburn. You're continuously burning calories after you finish, and it'll last anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes when you do cardio. Now, as I was saying before as well, as you get better at it, as you adapt to it, it's going to be less and less time. Your body's going to be able to recover faster, so you're going to get less of that afterburn. Early on, you're going to get a ton of it, and then as you get better at it, you're going to get less and less and less. And that's another one of those diminishing returns when it comes to running. Now, with weight training, right, this EPOC, or afterburn, will last upwards of 48 hours. So that's your body trying to recover, right, to repair the damage that you did when you were lifting weights. And that is going to end up, so while you may burn 100 calories a mile, right, or 280 to 520 per half hour, according to the American Council on Exercise, so somewhere in that space, you're going to do that, right? So let's say you ran 6 miles, right, in an hour. That's going to be about 600 calories, ballpark. If you were to lift weights for an hour, you're probably looking closer to like 300, 350 calories burned during that time, right? So while you're not burning as many calories doing the actual work, you're going to continuously burn more calories for the next, 47 hours while your body recovers and tries to get you back to normal. So by the end of your training, like that 48 hours and that EPOC like time frame, you will be probably right around where you would have been if you would have done that cardio. So like people poo-poo on weight training, saying that cardio is king and cardio is the most important aspect if you're trying to lose weight. This is absolute nonsense. Weight training is going to end up giving you a net break even, more than likely, depending on what kind of cardio you're doing. It'll be a break even between lifting and running, right? So like weight train, if you're looking to lose weight, it'll give you roughly the same benefits. Now, it's not going to give you the same cardiovascular benefits, right? So if your doctor's telling you your heart's unhealthy, right, you need to do cardio, that's a whole different like ball of wax there. So like try to think we're just talking about aesthetics and things like that today. A little bit of cardio to help your heart behave better and function better is not going to be the same as going and lifting weights, although lifting weights will also give you those cardiovascular benefits. One more thing about like lifting weights, right, is one of the outcomes or one of the byproducts or the adaptations that we make while we're lifting weights or while we recover from lifting weights is more muscle mass. And one of the best benefits of muscle mass is it's something that we call metabolically active tissue. Now, what that means is that your muscles, they use energy, right? That's a big part of like what our overall energy cost is throughout the day, is our muscles firing and doing things. And believe it or not, those muscles, right, those muscle cells, those protein structures, they cost energy just to maintain. So you'll be able to, if we can add like, let's say, like 10 pounds of muscle to your frame over the course of a year or a couple years or however long it takes you to grow, you're going to be burning upwards of like an extra 2,500 calories a week from that extra muscle mass. So think, if you are trying to lose weight and you're going for body comp, what better way to do that than to just burn more calories for existing, right? And one way that we can do that is from lifting weights. And, running's not going to have that same benefit, while somebody who's severely untrained will be able to build some muscle from running. Again, that's those diminishing returns. That's going to stop fairly quickly, right? So in addition to getting the diminishing returns, and so let me also say this, there are diminishing returns when it comes to lifting weights. However, the variables are a lot more easy to kind of manage and deal with to move the needle or continue to move the needle in the right way. So if I go into the gym, right, if you go run that mile every day, eventually that mile is going to be way too easy. It's not going to cost you barely any energy, and you're not going to get the adaptations that you want because you've already got them. You're too efficient at it now. If I go in and I do the exact same like training routine every single day, which a lot of people do, I'm going to adapt to that as well. And I'm not going to get the same benefits from it a month from now as I did today. But the cool thing about weight training, right, is we can manipulate a ton of different variables, from rest periods to weight to volume to bar speed. There's a lot of things that we can do to change the overall like adaptation outcome with our training that we just can't do when we're running, right? So, or doing cardio of any kind. So while weight training absolutely does have those diminishing returns at some point, it's a lot easier to manipulate the variables to continuously progress to where we want to go. So diminishing returns from running, right? And weight training basically being like a break even from a caloric burn standpoint when it's all said and done, to doing that cardio, right? And we get the added benefit of being able to build muscle mass, which is going to cost more energy, which means we're going to be able to lose even more weight. All right, so now we're actually going to circle back and we're going to talk about the poor outcomes from running that we can experience. All right, so in the article that I wrote quite a while back, it's called The Running Red Pill. If you just do a Google search for it, you'll be able to find it. I'll also link it into the description. I talked about the overuse injuries associated with running, right? And so if we are somebody who is already overweight and we choose running, it's kind of wild. A lot of people think weight training is dangerous and you can hurt yourself, but in reality, running is, in my opinion, infinitely worse. You think about how many steps you're going to take over the course of a mile, right? Versus how many like lunge reps you're going to do or how many squat reps you're going to do. The overall likelihood of you getting hurt is going to be significantly higher when it comes to running. All right. So one thing here, as far as overall like tonnage and workload go, like running is actually going to have a higher one than most weight training is because of how many steps you take throughout the course of running. So when you run a mile, on average, you take about 1,500 steps. That's about 750 steps each leg. That's for 1 mile, right? And that's if we're running like a normal human being and not somebody who's not, or who's horribly out of shape and taking like tiny little like walking steps. The ground reaction forces of running are right around 2 to 3 times your body weight, right? So every time that you hit the ground, you have to overcome 2 to 3 times your body weight, depending on how fast you're moving, for you to continuously propel your body forward, right? So you're not just stopping yourself from falling to the ground, you are also propelling yourself forward. So it's going to be 2 to 3 times your body weight. Let's say you weighed 200 pounds, right? Like kind of the example we talked about earlier, right? Every step you're going to be overcoming upwards of 600 pounds, right, of force, right? So not 600 actual pounds, but 600 pounds of force. That's going to be going through your fascia, your muscles, your joints, your ligaments, your tendons are all going to have to deal with that. And it's a lot, right? Show me one exercise where you're going to be doing even 600 pounds of force, like, or yeah, I guess 600 pounds of workload rather, like in a set, right? So if you're doing lunges with like, I don't know, 30-pound dumbbells, let's say 60 pounds. If you do 10 of them, right, that's going to be the equivalent of like 1 step, right? And it's not quite this drastic, but I'm just trying to paint a picture here for how much force we're overcoming and what the total like workload of jogging a mile is, right? So that's 600 pounds every step, right? If we say 1,500 steps, we're talking about 900,000 pounds of force, right, per mile. That's a lot. And when you think about somebody who's overweight, like that hitting your joints every single step, right? If your feet aren't in the perfect position and you're pronating, that's like you wearing the outside edges of your knee out. That's you, like your posterior tibialis muscle getting like this huge stretch over and over and over again. That's your talus if it's not sitting perfectly in your ankle and your foot's not in the exact right position, getting crushed like into between your like your heel bone, your calcaneus, and your two lower leg bones. So that's a lot of force to overcome over and over and over and over and over again, right? And there is something called the 10-pound head. So for every inch forward your head sits, right? We have a lot of people that kind of end up like in this space. Let's say that's like 2 inches. You add about 10 pounds to the overall force that you have to overcome. So if you are 200 pounds and your head sits forward because you're looking at the ground, that let's add another 20 pounds, multiply that by 3. So now we're talking about 660 pounds of overall force that we're having to overcome. It's wild. But that's literally how it works. It's a ton of force. It's not a light load that we're kind of overcoming when we go to sprint and even to jog even, or if we're putting forth effort that's less or more than a jog and we're actually what would be qualified as running. Running is so detrimental to your overall movement, and I guess your joints. There's actually something called runner's knee. They've named an actual issue with the knee after running because so many people who run deal with it. And it's far beyond the scope of this current episode here to go over like mechanics of the body, but just think, if you are somebody who doesn't run with perfect positioning and perfect form, and you're not running on a perfectly flat surface, every step you take, you're more than likely, you've got a little bit of pronation, which is going to cause your knee to come in, your hip to internally rotate, and that's bad all the way around. So if you're thinking running is safer than lifting weights, and it's going to be better for me because I'm going to burn more calories, we got to rethink this whole thought process. Like I said, there's nothing wrong with having running be part of like your overall fitness plan, but it cannot be something that you're using as like a mainstay. It can be something, and I tell my athletes all the time, if you're somebody who likes to run to like clear your head and it's good mentally for you, then perfect. Go run a mile. I'm not going to stop you. But when I have athletes who are running 4, 5, 6, 7 miles a day, multiple times a week, right? And you're an athlete that only needs all-out effort for like 5 to 10 seconds at a time, like we're going to have a problem here because you're messing like with your body positioning. You're being a lot harsher on your joints than you need to. Like real quick, like a knee issue when running can turn into a back issue real quick. And if you've ever been somebody who ran distances, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And the reason for that is because it's not just happening at the knee. With that hip internally rotating, you're getting some poor outcomes in your back as well. So, diminishing returns, burning roughly just as many calories as weight training when it's all said and done, and you're putting yourself in a position to probably deal with some kind of overuse injury. Even if it's not runner's knee, it could be something in the ankle, it could be something in the hip. It will eventually more than likely be something that ends up in your back. All right, so next we're going to talk about some of the hormonal implications of running and how they lead to undesired outcomes, the total or the kinds of adaptations that you're probably not looking for. All right, so hormones are very important for a lot of things, but they're super important when it comes to aesthetics and body composition, right? Having the right balance of estrogen, growth hormone, cortisol, testosterone is all going to be incredibly important when it's all said and done. All right, so the most important things that we want to do, we want to make sure that as a woman, like we're not getting crazy drops in estrogen, that we're not, our progesterone's not getting messed up. Growth hormone as we age is going to decline anyways, right? But we don't want to increase like cortisol, and we don't want to have like an out of whack like testosterone and progesterone, estrogen totals in our body, right? So some of the things that running has been shown to do, right, from a testosterone or androgen standpoint, distance running has been shown to decrease testosterone in both women and men. Right, this is a bad thing. Women obviously don't have as high of testosterone levels, but it's still important that they have it. And men in this country, our testosterone levels are in the toilet. We are trending towards zero when it comes to our ability to procreate, which is not good. And I think your average 20 some odd year old has the same testosterone levels that your 70-year-old grandpa had like 30 years ago. Like, it's absolutely insane. Our reproductive capabilities and our testosterone levels in men are already very low. Running could help kind of tip that scale into an even worse position. So same with women. Again, it can lower those levels, and we don't want that. From an estrogen standpoint, distance running has been shown to decrease estrogen levels in women and can temporarily lead to cessation of menstruation, right? So you could lose the ability to have your period if your volume's too high, right? And a lot of that, there's a couple reasons for things like that. It's the increased levels of stress. A lot of times these like insane distance running, they come with some kind of eating disorder where we're not getting the right amount of nutrients, which can also hurt it. But it's wild that can happen, right? So your estrogen levels can be decreased, and it can stop you from menstruating. Not a good thing, right? Progesterone and cortisol. Distance running can lead to decreases in progesterone and an increase in cortisol. And if you guys remember, cortisol is like that stress hormone signal, right? So higher levels of cortisol can do a few things. One, it's going to make your body hold on to fat more, right? It doesn't allow you to get into that kind of catabolic state of burning. But it also can lead to you walking around like an anxious, depressed mess. There's study I saw recently on those who consume alcohol regularly, meaning like 1 or 2 glasses a night of wine or a couple drinks on the weekend, not even like everyday things, where the increase in cortisol from doing that, from being a quote unquote regular drinker, even not even a heavy drinker, what it does to the anxiety and depression levels in the people who are doing them. So wild, right? But running can increase cortisol, which is not a good thing. This is also because both share the same precursor in pregnenolone, right? And the body will prioritize cortisol to help the body deal with stress placed on it by the distance running. So your progesterone levels will go down because your body is using that pregnenolone to create cortisol, which is something we don't want a lot of. Cortisol is very integral and important in recovery, but we don't want over heightened levels of it all the time. So again, not a great thing. Growth hormone, distance running can cause slight increases in growth hormone, right? However, with enough volume and consistency over time, it will show a dip in overall growth hormone production, which is not good, right? And so here's a couple things that weight training can do, right, for these hormones as well, right? So we've got testosterone can be lowered from running, estrogen can be lowered in women from running, progesterone goes down, cortisol goes up, and growth hormone, although early on you can see a increase, which could just be due to the impact on the ground, right? Your body responding to your bones being under more stress. Eventually you will see a dip in that growth hormone. Testosterone from weight training. Weight training at higher intensities has been shown to increase testosterone in both women and men, all right, which is a good thing. Again, women, you're not going to get crazy high levels of testosterone. We're talking about like healthy levels of testosterone. Estrogen, weight training has been shown to help balance estrogen in women, right? Just maintaining like a good, healthy level. Progesterone and cortisol. Now, weight training will absolutely lead to an increase in cortisol. Because cortisol is like really important when it comes to remodeling tissue after training. However, the response won't lead to decreased progesterone levels, as the increase in cortisol won't be so high like it gets from running long distances, unless your volume gets out of control. So we're talking about like your average CrossFitter or somebody who thinks they're on a bodybuilding split doing like 400 or 500 reps of training. And again, that's because like running a mile is a ton of reps, right? You're not even going to come close to sniffing 750 reps a leg or 1,500 total reps in a weight training session, hopefully. And then growth hormone, heavier weight training, particularly the compound movements like the squat, deadlift, even bench pressing, have been shown to increase growth hormone levels to a better, I guess, a higher level. But obviously it's not a ton, but it does help because for one, right, your muscles are growing, but for two, your bones are becoming more dense, right? And that growth hormone is a signal to do those things. So weight training will help increase testosterone, will help balance estrogen, will leave progesterone mostly alone because the increase in cortisol isn't overly high the way it is in running. Again, a necessary thing. We don't want to eliminate cortisol because we need it, but we just don't want it to be so high that we end up in a place that leads to those progesterone levels getting messed up for women. And then growth hormone, we can see increases in growth hormone, which will help with that bone density, among many other things. So weight training is, in my opinion, infinitely better for your overall health than long distance training is going to be, because remember, those diminishing returns at some point in time, running wears itself out. So I said earlier, we have to increase that intensity, or we have to increase that volume. And what most people, they're going to top out at a certain speed. They're not going to be able to run faster. So that volume has to go higher and higher and higher and higher. And those 1,500 steps a mile, then maybe now it becomes 4,500, maybe it's 6,000, maybe we get up to 10,000, 10,000, because we're having to increase that overall volume so high, and that has horrible effects on our hormone levels. So running bad, weight training good. But to recap, running bad, weight training good. All right, first off, the first person ever to run a marathon, which is like the ultimate long distance running, keeled over and died when he finished. You're going to hit diminishing returns pretty quick. These cardiovascular adaptations happen fairly fast, but they're also incredibly fleeting, right? So if you were to run a mile today and a week from now, that same mile is going to be a little bit easier as long as you stick with it. But if you were to not run for 10, 15 days, you would lose a lot of those adaptations. So they come on fast, but they're fleeting. They don't stick around very long. It can be detrimental to your overall hormone profile. All the things that we listed before. You need growth hormone for a lot of things. You need testosterone for a lot of things. Estrogen needs to be in the right balance. Progesterone for women. We need to keep cortisol levels at an acceptable range to be able to recover and get the body that we're desiring, the adaptations that we're looking for. Weight training is going to have an EPOC, or an excess post exercise oxygen consumption afterburn, equivalent pretty much to what running will when it's all said and done, when we get all the way through that recovery process. So, if you are looking this year for your new year, new me type deal with this New Year's resolution, or you're just looking to get into shape, think really hard about if cardio is something that needs to be the focus in the center of your overall training. Like I said, I have no problem. If you enjoy running, go do it. Do the things that make you happy. That's what, part of getting in shape is making sure that your overall mental health is good, so you don't slip back into bad habits, right? The ones that got you to where you are now. So if running is something you like doing, go do it. Go run a mile, clear your head, get out there in the sun. Vitamin D is a great thing too. But weight training should be the overall focus. From a cardio perspective, I'll tell you, dude, 90% of the population, if you just went for a 20-minute walk a day and kind of started watching what you're eating, you'd look a million times better than you do now. Exercise doesn't have to be this thing where we destroy ourselves every day. Exercise is something that should add value to your life and not just be constantly draining the tank. So if you're somebody who's looking to get in shape, you'd start off with three days training a week and go for a walk for 20 minutes the other 4 days of the week. You'd be surprised if you just start watching what you're putting into your mouth. You'd be surprised, the outcomes that you'd have from a body comp perspective. So don't feel like running has to be included in your training. It absolutely doesn't. Cardio in general doesn't have to be a really big part of your training. Weight training early on especially is going to have a very good impact on your cardiovascular system. So unless your doctor is telling you that you need to go run, which I doubt most doctors are going to tell you that, because odds are if you're dealing with some cardiovascular issues, you're probably severely overweight and you shouldn't be running anyways. Go for a walk. Get your weight training in. Go for a walk. watch what you eat, get some good sleep, stay away from your phone late at night, and you would be surprised at how much better your life gets and how much better your body looks, in addition to how much better you'll feel. All right, so that's it for today. Today was more like a rant. I feel like I went off in some various directions from time to time, but just stop running. Like I'm not a fan of it. I don't think it should be this big thing that we put up on a pedestal when it comes to losing weight. It doesn't have to be a part of it, especially if you're somebody who's not an athlete. So that's going to be it for today. Don't run. Go lift weights. We'll see you next week. Hope you learned something, and have a good weekend.